Good afternoon, everyone. You're very welcome to our latest edition of our Straight Talk series. My name's Andy McGill, and I'm your host for today. And I have the pleasure to be joined by former England and Chelsea midfielder and also mum of three, Katie Chapman. Hi, Katie.
Hi, how are you?
Very well, thanks. Very well. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No, you're welcome.
Very good. So for everyone watching, and the part of the whole aim of our Straight Talk series is very much just to give you a little bit of sort of a behind the scenes look, a little scratch underneath the surface of sort of a particular topic. As you've seen, today's topic is around physiotherapy. So just as a little bit of a background, I myself, prior to joining Vitality, worked for almost 10 years professionally as a physiotherapist. So I should hopefully be able to answer a few questions and sort of share a little bit of insight in that. And then Katie, obviously, as a professional footballer, you your body was your temple, and that was sort of what you used to sort of do your sport. So no doubt you'll be able to share some insights with us today as well in terms of how to look after your body. Would that be right?
Yeah, I'm sure I can.
Very good, very good. Katie, one of the key things that we're chatting about today, as I said, is around sort of maintenance, looking after our bodies and things. And I kind of want to start at the beginning with yourself. Your early career, you started very, very young as a professional footballer. Were you injured at that time? Any sort of experience with that? Or were you just, I suppose, like us all, whenever we're in our younger years, were you absolutely bulletproof?
I think I was bulletproof. I think I was brought up to be tough. I think playing as well with boys back then made you tough, because I think you had to be tough and you had to be mentally tough too. But no, in my early years, I didn't experience many injuries at all. Maybe a couple of rolled ankles and stuff like that. But other than that, no, I was pretty solid.
I'm just interested, was there much of a focus on it? Because if I look at sort of high performing sports, men and women now, there's lots of focus. There's also lots of discussion in the media with regards to injuries. And I think everyone knows what's going on with everybody. Whenever you started off, was it ever present? Was it a big topic of discussion?
No, I don't think it was ever a big topic of discussion. I think back then an injury was an injury. You sort of managed it yourself and you went home and you dealt with it, or your mum and dad, put ice on it, which was the general thing to do when you had an injury or a bruise or something like, or a plaster if you got a cut. And there wasn't access to a lot of physios and stuff like that I knew that you could get support from. So I think it is a lot more talked about, because I think now they talk about preventing injuries, don't they, a lot more, rather than having to manage them when they happen. So I think that's a good part of the talking about it now.
I would say that the same in terms of my own career. So certainly whenever I went into physiotherapy in the early 2000s, the common sort of understanding was that I would be on the sideline with with the magic sponge, and then helping footballers to sort of get over their knee injuries and things. But certainly there's been a huge amount, and thankfully so. There is more to physiotherapy than the magic sponge. I'll just clarify that.
Magic spray.
Oh, you've got it. Oh, you've got all my material. It's all in it. But the whole sort of aspect around prehabilitation, preventative management of injuries is key. So nowadays, young athletes coming through, even at the younger ages of sort of 7, 8, 9, 10, then into teenage years, are always being screened, always being flagged up as in terms of potential injuries. And even you can probably see an athlete in front of you, and before you actually ask them what type of sport to do, you can generally tell by body shape, by how they move, things like that, as to what potential sport that they may do. For example, one-handed tennis players, you'll see that they're very dominant on one side. And I know I've treated a few footballers in the past, and the key thing, I suppose really is around leg dominance, Katie, in terms of making sure that you've always got a dominant leg, but trying to use two and trying to always just try to get balance in our bodies. Is that something that you ever sort of had to work on? I know probably tactically you probably had to work on both your right and your left foot, so you could kick both sides and open up opportunities. But did you ever think about it, and was there ever focus from an injury prevention and a sort of a body balance perspective in that regard?
There was. I think as the game became more professional in the women's side, I think we started to do prehab, which was obviously preparing your body ready for exercise, which was doing either, band work, getting your glutes ready to fire up, to go out, to doing maybe, mobility stuff, using the foam roller to obviously loosen yourself, and just more prep, ready for the session, ready for the intense session. And I felt that even when we did like weights and gym work, it was always focusing on the balance. It was always making sure that both sides were as strong as the other, and that around your core area, which is obviously your steering wheel, that was absolutely solid, because that's what drives you. And it became more important as obviously my career went on. Whereas before, when I was young, you didn't really hear about it. Your warm up was going out and doing a little run, a static stretch, and off you go. And young, you can sometimes get away with that, but the older you get, you're more prone to injury because of your flexibility and stuff like that. You need to stretch, you need to get your body warm, ready to go. So it became more conscious later on in my career.
Absolutely. And would you say that that was your career in terms of obviously playing around with different teams and going up, and then obviously of course playing at the highest professional level for your country? Would you say that there was an element of the teams that you were progressing through that then sort of that prehabilitation and work off the pitch became more important? Or would you say that that was kind of almost something that you recognized in yourself, saying, look, if I want to sort of continue to be fit and active and to be able to do my sport, I need to really focus on these things?
I think it was within the clubs. I think obviously the education of that and what that actually does, rather than someone just telling you need to do this. If they give you the history and the thing behind it, the knowledge behind it, why I'm doing it and why I need to do it. I think once I got the understanding of that, I made sure I did do it, because everyone would get away with, not warming up and that sort of stuff. But until you know how important it actually is, and if you don't warm up properly, you get injured, you start to take it seriously then.
Absolutely. And I think that's a key point, Katie, for us all now at the moment, because, as I said, us mortals who aren't professional athletes, we similarly, we're invincible whenever we're younger. However, then as we age, or alternatively as a sort of life demands and sort of the number of things that we have to juggle increase, the opportunities to actually exercise or look after ourselves or put ourselves first does reduce. So we have to make sure that we're getting the most from those sessions, don't we? And that's where sort of our doing a warm up, doing a cool down, it might take an extra 10 minutes. However, it is going to be far better for you in terms of actually sort of being able to do that activity. Now, I will profess here that I know the theory, but I don't always stick to it. So don't take me as gospel, but certainly I can understand how hard it is. If you've only got 40 minutes to try and get something in, sometimes you don't want to waste 5 minutes warming up and 10 minutes cooling down. You kind of just want to get out there and get on with it. I suppose from your own experience, what would your advice be to everyone at home in terms of the importance of warming up and cooling down? Why do you think it benefited you?
It benefited because it prepared my body ready for exercise. I think once you're warmed up and you're warmed up properly, you can go into a higher intensity straight away. Whereas otherwise, you've got to gradually build up to get to the intensity you probably need to get to anyway. So that 5 minutes will, without consciously knowing it, you're warming up anyway, because you're not just going to go from cold straight into something intense anyway. So you will take a period of 5-10 minutes where you warm up, so you gradually build into the exercise you're doing. I think also for recovery after, I think, if you're not warmed up and you're going to high intensity exercise, the chance of you stiffening up quite quickly after and maybe lasting a couple of days, whereas you could, warm up, get yourself ready, cool down and cool your body down and stretch. Then you might only feel the DOMs or, your muscles aching for a little bit less afterwards, rather than a couple of days stretch where you put yourself back.
Absolutely. And that's where the warm up is really good. So as in terms of, just to give a little bit of an insight in terms of like general advice on this, a dynamic warm up is generally the best. So a dynamic warm up is whereby you are going through the movements of what you're going to be doing in that session. So again, Katie, if I think about your world, a dynamic warm up for you going on to the pitch to do a training exercise will be might be some sort of kicking, it might be lunges, it might be just general big body movements, versus if you're going to go into the gym, then it might be a little bit more specific in terms of the movements you're trying to do. But I suppose the key thing for everyone watching is the fact that if you're going to do a dynamic warm-up, it doesn't necessarily, there's no hard and fast rules as to what it needs to be. It's just general movement, which is really, really good. The key benefit of doing that is, one, it actually gets your heart pumping. It actually gets you moving. It gets you actually sort of warmed up in that regard, gets your engine going. So that gets more blood pumping around your body, gets more oxygen to your muscles as well. That then allows them to perform, and that allows them, the muscles themselves, to get more blood into them, and then that gets a lot more heat into them. More heat brings flexibility. So it's actually priming your muscles to then to be able to deliver at a better rate. So for example, if you're going to be doing your run, or alternatively you're going to, whenever we're allowed to, sort of go back into the gym, or even, Katie, I know you're doing some HIIT workouts at home, that means that it allows your muscles to perform at the highest level that they can as soon as they can. It doesn't mean that you're just sort of kind of getting into it by the time you get into your second set of your workout. So it's, again, quality over quantity. And then in terms of a cool down afterwards, generally it can be dynamic, whereby you're moving gently through the movements that you've done. But generally you could do a more static cool down at that stage. So again, just letting the heart rate come down, just letting your body cool down, but then moving through and stretching those areas that you've been exercising. So again, Katie, what would have been always in your cool downs the pinch points, or the areas that, you know, if I don't stretch this, it's going to bite me? Because everyone's got, based upon sort of our own body physiology, makeup, our own strengths and weaknesses internally, we've all got sort of areas that we know that we need to focus on more. What were those for you?
Mine would be my hip flexors, actually, my glutes. I always had quite tight hip flexors, so I'd make sure I obviously focused on those two muscle groups. They're obviously quite major muscle groups as well, so I made sure I focused on those to keep myself loose and prevent injury, because, you know, I knew if I didn't, then I could potentially get injured.
Particularly as a footballer, hip flexors, glutes, very, very dominant. Those are big muscle areas that you're using, and very, very strong. What let's chat about sort of kind of going into the peak of your career, Katie, and that sort of that period. Now, you have said to me that you generally were relatively injury free. It was only sort of maybe more towards the end of your career. What would you say was the key? Like, have you any insight as to why that was the case? How did you maintain such a high level of performance, but yet also look after your body and avoid any sort of big injuries?
I think a lot of it is to do with, obviously, the warming up properly, getting my body prepared to exercise. I think cooling down properly. I think recovery aids, whether it be, you know, ice bath, whether it be the recovery leggings, the socks, whatever it is that you needed, protein shakes, all that aided recovery stuff. Obviously diet as well. I made sure I had a healthy diet, a variety of all sorts of things that obviously aids and helps recovery. So I think I was a professional athlete, so I had to behave in a professional manner, and that meant to, you know, not just focusing on one thing, it meant the whole thing, everything, whether it be sleep, whether it be diet, whether it be recovery strategies that I need, preparing and cooling down my body before and after exercise, and, you know, taking it seriously.
Exactly. And that's an interesting point, because we are chatting to a lot of members and the public in general on a day-to-day basis, and we get lots of questions. And just on that point, look, if anyone watching does have any questions, please pop them in the comments box and we'll be able to bring them up, and Katie and I will do our very best to answer them. But one of the key, I suppose, hot topics at the moment is around compression. Why should we have compression tights, say for example for our legs? What's the benefits of it? And I think, Katie, what is an important observation for us, and I think key thing to point out, is very much you were performing at such a high level, and your body was sort of the mode through which you were actually performing. So for you to get the best out of it on a day-by-day basis, on a training perspective, to then at 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon for it still to perform at a high level, you had to build in all these extra additional bits and pieces and building blocks to ensure that you were covering absolutely everything. So if you could only choose one, obviously everything is important. I loved your point with regards to sleep. I loved your point with regards to nutrition. We'll cover those in a moment. But if there was one thing that you would swear by, what would it be?
Ice bath. People think I'm mad because of an ice bath. I think it was like an instant. It was, you know, it was pain to get in. It hurts. I'm not going to lie, it hurts to get in. But the feeling you get after, the freshness, it feels like it works instantly, which is great. And I believed it was good for me. I believed it helped me recover. Some people it doesn't work for. Some people it's something else that works for them, and we're all quite individual on that. But for me, it was an ice bath.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that I like an ice bath. I'm not going there. I'm a warm water person, but do ice baths work? Do compression work? The key thing is, and I think, Katie, you make a really, really important distinction there, is that you believe that it worked for you. You had faith in that, and you actually felt the benefit of it, regardless of what that was. At an actual physiological perspective, and coming from my own sort of physiotherapy perspective, these things all work. They're all good. So compression is, whenever we're exercising, what you're actually doing at the level of the muscle is making you're damaging the muscle. You're putting in micro tears whenever you're exercising and you're pushing. And what happens if you then sort of recover properly is that those micro tears heal, your muscles actually learn to push more load, they recover, and that's how they get bigger. So again, this is happening on a day-to-day basis whenever we exercise. So compression is very, very good for bringing the muscle back together and just, again, aiding blood flow, aiding the oxygenation through that area to give the muscle, it doesn't speed up healing, but it gives the muscle the best opportunity it can to be able to then heal in an adequate way. If you're exercising casually, running 2 to 3 times a week, or gymming, or hitting, whatever it might be, is there a need for compression? I dare say that it's probably not a huge requirement. But what I would definitely want to clearly communicate is that if you feel that you get the benefit from it, if you feel that it works for you, then it's a really, really important thing to use. But the key thing is very much just understanding what works for you and how your body feels. Because dare I say, Katie, that despite the fact that you're a professional athlete, you were mandated to do these things. Was there still a little bit of flexibility within the treatment options for you to choose what you might do a little bit more of, or what you might do a little bit less of? Like, for example, were there other teammates who potentially weren't as big fans of the ice bath, but they could potentially do something different?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was a lot of things on offer. I mean, it is individual, and it depends what works for you, because not everything works for everybody. And I think it's important that you get that right, because, if I'm having an ice bath and someone feels that it doesn't do what they think it should do, then don't do it. Find something that does work for you. And I think that's the important part. That is, every aid of recovery is individual.
Absolutely, everybody is different, and it kind of goes back to my point with regards to, we all do different sports. Now, we might do different sports because we're actually like, for lots and lots of different factors. We may get into it because our family did that sport, so that's just a sport that you did and you grew up doing. Or alternatively, you might just be getting into something because, for example, I know a lot of people are getting into running now because we've got no other option. So it's all about appreciating the sport that you're doing, and equally that everybody is different. So for example, if you're out running around the park and you see someone running past and they've got 2 compression socks, they've got this hat on, they've got all these bits and pieces, that doesn't mean that you need all of those bits and pieces to be a faster runner. That's what works for them. It's very much about finding what works for you. And I'll definitely reiterate that the ice baths, I'm happy to know that it does not work for me. Just a good relaxation and staying warm is definitely what works for me, Katie. Now, it would be a key area that I do want to focus on here, and I do sort of want to draw attention to, is you're a mum of 3 boys. You had your 3 boys in the thick of your professional career. Phenomenal. Give us a little bit of an insight. How did you do that? What were the strategies and the ways to sort of actually manage coming back to such a high level of professional sport after your pregnancies? What would you say were the key things that you did that helped you to do that?
I think when I had my first child, I was a professional at Fulham at that point. So I had great medical staff there. The physio obviously wrote me a program that I worked on, so I trained throughout my pregnancy. I had doctors there obviously to monitor the stuff that I was doing, but I trained up until 2 weeks before my due date, which helped me, actually. I think it kept me mentally prepared for what was coming, and in a good place, so that when I did have my first child, that I was ready to get back to fitness. I think it's tough. It's not easy. I think, some days you don't feel like training. That's like most people. It depends on the day, how you feel. Sometimes you have to push yourself to go and do these things, and it's hard. It's hard to do things by yourself. But I think for me, because I had so much support around me, and I trained throughout the pregnancy, and I had my child, I think after the 6-week check after giving birth, I was back training again. And it's I think everyone thought I was crazy, to be quite honest with you. I think they thought I was mad. But I think training throughout the pregnancy allowed me to get back quite quickly, because my body was still in really good shape. And I also felt my oxygen levels raised by, God knows what. I felt I was fitter when I went back to what I was before I was pregnant. So that was a bit crazy for me.
I think that there's a key message in there, Katie, with regards to being fit for pregnancy, and it's such a strange and a different time in terms of actually, sort of being pregnant, and the physiological changes that happen. You really do need, in terms of actually sort of, I can remember sort of, and I've in the past treated a lot of ladies with lots and lots of different symptoms due to pregnancy, because your physiology does change. So again, you are probably at a high level of physical activity, sort of preparedness and fitness, which meant that you were able to train sort of at a relatively high level, and much higher than, as I say, the average person, for right up until sort of late on into pregnancy. I think for others watching, it's a key thing with regards to a similar message in terms of just finding what works for you. We're definitely not saying here that you should be exercising at a professional level up until 2 weeks before your due date. But certainly, I think that's a key thing in terms of finding what works for you within that. Certainly a lot of, Katie, I want to sort of just scratch on this a little bit and delve into this with regards to sort of core stability, Pilates, yoga. Did you incorporate any of that even more so, or did you find that was helpful for you? Because I do know that that's one of the key things with pregnancy, is obviously it impacts your core muscles. It impacts the center of your body, which, as you've already said, is your steering wheel. Particularly with football, you're always turning. Did you have any did you put any special different focus onto that? Did you find that it did work for you? Did you find, was it beneficial?
Yeah, I think for me, I worked a lot, obviously, on my pelvic floor muscles, definitely after having the baby. And I think I worked really, really hard on that, because I knew, obviously, how it would affect me if I didn't do it. And if I wanted to go back then again to playing at a high level and playing sport, then I needed to make sure that I was conscious of that part of it. And I think a lot of women obviously don't understand that part of it, or don't know how to focus on that, and how important it actually is to do that before anything else, is to get that right. And I also think with women, obviously there's a lot of scaremongering as well through pregnancy about doing exercise. I think you've got to be conscious. Yes, you've got to be sensible about it and seek medical advice, because through pregnancy, women are all different. We all experience different things. And I think it's about protecting yourself and your own body because of the changes. I mean, the chance of you getting injured during pregnancy, because everything loosens, all your joints and stuff like that. That's the main concern. So I think as long as you get the right information about it and you do the right thing, it's not about going out there and killing yourself, running so far or whatever. It's just about making yourself feel good, because I think that's what it does too. Mentally, it makes you feel good, because pregnancy can be really tough.
You made a really, really good point, Katie, around sort of just turning up, just doing something, even if you didn't want to. And that is a key thing. It's almost applies to us all, doesn't it? Like, even if you don't want to get out there, even getting out for a walk around the block, don't worry if you're not running your 5Ks as you think you should be doing, or you thought you should be doing. Even just getting out and moving, particularly at the moment, actually, I'm even noticing it with myself with not commuting. Our overall volume of and sort of incidental steps and what we're doing on how active we are generally is dramatically reduced. So it's key to just sort of just getting something done, because ultimately, even thinking about things from again, if we stay along the theme of core stability, a lot of us are now sitting down on a day-to-day basis. So be you returning from pregnancy, be you sort of being relatively more sedentary, focusing on core stability and things from again, reflecting back and from a physiotherapy perspective, your muscles will work if you use them. The old adage, if you don't use it, you lose it, kind of does apply, because one of the key examples we always use is that we're quite used to sort of leaning back on chairs, and if the support is there, our bodies will use it. But if we're standing up, if we're moving around, we're actually moving our body, we're getting up against gravity, we're challenging it in lots and lots of different ways. And that's going to be good for us, because then that actually helps our muscles to switch on, that helps our muscles to be active. Like, Katie, if I
do the pelvic tilt, when you sit on the chair. So the same thing, even if you are sitting, you can still do the pelvic tilt, sit on the edge of the chair and, just tilt like I used to do those small things, even if I had to just, sit, I'd still do that. I'd sit there, be doing that, be conscious of, and it is taking them little bits of time, even when, you don't feel like you've got time, you can still do little bits.
Yeah, absolutely, fitting those little things in, and that's where you'll find that it might have an impact. So, for example, Katie, you said that you suffered from, or one of the key areas was tight hip flexors and tight glutes. Sometimes we will also have injuries in other areas because the underlying small muscles with our core stability aren't necessarily firing as well as they could be. So that's where fitting in sort of, again, I was actually doing it as you were speaking there, a little bit of pelvic tilting, core stability. Again, we have a session every Thursday with Louise Butler where we do Pilates. And you'll notice that we don't do a lot of movements, like big movements there. It's all quite small movements, but they're very, very difficult because we're working the smaller muscles that are responsible for controlling everything underlying it. And again, that allows the big muscles to perform and do what they're supposed to do.
I think people sometimes underestimate that, like the small movements are actually probably doing the biggest work. By focusing on them small things, it makes a massive difference to everything else. And I think sometimes we underestimate that.
Absolutely. Katie, just on that point and sort of going on to sort of being time poor and sort of obviously you've got a very, very different life now in terms of your day to day. How are you keeping fit? How are you fitting in sort of your physical activity? Like what does your routine look like now in terms of whenever you're versus your professional career?
Well, I think now that the children have gone back to school, I no longer have to drag them out with me to go for a run or to do a session. We say, like, Mom, do we have to? Yes, you have to. So I'd run, obviously, with my children, whether it be on the bikes, we'd go to the bikes. I think we've done every single park there possibly is to do, just to change the scenery. But I think now the kids about, we're doing HIIT sessions, 30-minute HIIT sessions, which have been great, 50 seconds work, 10 seconds rest, 30 exercises, which have been great for my strength and stuff like that. Just generally running. I'm looking forward to going back to play football again, actually. So fingers crossed that we continue to move forward and I can get back out playing again.
Very good. And I suppose, it's quite interestingly enough, are you noticing even with the exercise and things you're doing, have you got any injuries? Because I know that towards the end of your career, again, you obviously didn't really like hanging out with the physiotherapists, so you avoided them a lot, and it was only pretty much your calf you had a little bit of difficulty with. Are you noticing anything different that you need to do from a rehabilitation side at the moment, or is there any old niggles that are still sticking with you? Just interested in that side of things.
You know what, towards the end of my career, when I started to get more injuries, I actually adapted and changed the weights I was doing. So I used to do a lot of squats and stuff like that with quite heavy weights. I actually took them away and moved to doing a lot of body weight stuff, a lot of band stuff, because I felt that was better for me. I obviously had knee wear and tear in one of my knees, which was causing me a problem as well. So obviously the squats and stuff like that with weights wasn't helping me. But I think adapting to not using weights and going to body weight, sometimes people think, well, surely you haven't got the same strength as you have but you have. It just depends what you do and how you do it. So that really, really worked for me at the end of my career. Obviously, when I was picking up injuries and stuff like that. And I'm still conscious now. I don't do heavy weights really anymore. A lot of my stuff is a band work and a lot of body weight stuff. And obviously HIIT stuff with no weights, which is great for me. And I feel that now I'm not experiencing any injuries. I'm not experiencing really any tightness or anything like that. So for me, it's great.
That's fantastic. And I think that's a really, really important point, Katie, because ultimately, be it with with your sport and say, for example, with day-to-day life, first and foremost, we have to be able to move our bodies. So that's where things such as like HIIT, where you're just moving your own body weight, are really, really effective. If you have that right, and that is a good solid building block, then if you wish and you feel it's appropriate, then you would progress on to doing lots and lots of heavy weight. I think where sometimes a lot of us can get injured and do get injured, in all honesty, is where we're loading up our body with additional weight, additional load, but we haven't necessarily got the fundamentals right. It's like your building blocks aren't there. So that's why, even January 1st is a typical example. Generally around week 3 into the year, I used to see a lot of individuals coming to me with injuries, having, they've lasted so long, but because they haven't done the underlying warm-ups, cool down, core stability work, flexibility work, then go and add additional load on it, all it's going to do is magnify any cracks that were there, and then sort of lead on to sort of injuries. So you must be very patient, Katie. You're very, very patient at sort of understanding where your niggles are, and then making sure that you've got a different tactic to make sure you don't aggravate those.
Listen, I never ever wanted to be in the physio room, and I'm sure every physio that you spoke to will tell you the same thing. They found it really difficult to keep me in there. I was like, no, like I can manage this. We'll do the right things. Tell me what I need to do. I'll do the right things to feel. I don't want to come back in here. So if I could avoid going into that room, I would do absolutely anything.
Right. Physiotherapists are generally nice people, but as I said, as a professional footballer, you definitely don't want to be hanging out with us too much.
You never want to be injured. Well, injuring is being injured is the most frustrating thing. But you have to do the right things to get it right. So you need to listen to your body and to the people that are guiding you.
Cool. Okay, I was going to wrap up by asking for one final tip, but I think you might have already given us two there. I mean, like, any final words of advice, I suppose, for us mere mortals in terms of looking after our bodies throughout because ultimately we want to be fit for life. So again, any thoughts or advice on how we could all achieve that?
I think listen to your body, recover properly. I think exercise is, if you're not used to doing exercise, then progress slowly. Doesn't have to be from one thing to another. You don't have to be able to do 5K straight away. Make sure that it's a gradual process and build your body up ready for that, because then you'll prevent your injuries.
No wiser words than that, Katie. I would fully appreciate that. Again, coming from my own perspective, that's the key thing, is being patient. So understanding the niggles that you may have in your body, all that is your body just saying, hey, something to be aware of. Don't ignore those. Far easier to get them addressed and get sort of like take a few, maybe it might be a few days, it might be a few weeks away from your training plan, but then you'll be able to come back and be in a better state to be able to progress and ultimately exercise for longer and have the health impacts for a longer period of time as well.
Yep.
Perfect.
Correct.
Katie, we could go on, we could chat further. Hopefully, maybe we'll have another opportunity to do so in the future. But that's it for today with our Straight Talk session. Katie, thank you so much for joining us, and everyone, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And we will be back again. Don't forget to miss us. We've got a HIIT workout with Andrew on Friday afternoon, which is more around sort of focusing on our low impact as well. So if you've been interested in any of the principles and things that we're chatting to today, that's a great next session for you to check out. All the best, and thanks for joining us.